to Jeb Bush about that. But first to Scott Walker and the issue of how much time the establishment candidates gained. In Walker's case, all of 6 minutes. That's about half the time Donald Trump enjoyed. But Scott Walker telling me he still thinks he made the most of it. Take a look.
There'll be plenty more debates out there, and I think in the end what people want is not just people who get good punchlines or go on the attack. My focus in terms of attacks was on Hillary Clinton, and I hope I've showed people that I'm ready to take her on, and not just in words, but in deeds, that I'm ready to fight and win. I've shown we can actually get results in a blue state, and I've done it without compromising my principles, and if given the chance, I think that marks a great contrast with Hillary Clinton in the general election.
Were you playing it safe, though, Governor? The reason why I ask is that among the reviews we got today, the Washington Post, the Wisconsin governor wasn't bad. He was just overly scripted, just not great. CNN, he stayed on message, was delivering concise responses, but he didn't break out from the rest of the field. The New York Times, Mr. Walker ran by not losing, and that might be a good thing. He passed the test. But what they seem to all be saying is that you were on guard not to destroy those poll numbers that you were in the upper tier, but that you were playing it too safe. What do you think?
Well, again, there's plenty more opportunities going forward to distinguish ourselves. As you saw early on, all the attention was on Donald Trump and whether or not he was going to run as a third candidate or not. My focus was on saying, you know, we should actually spend time talking about who the real opponent was, and it wasn't fellow Republicans out there. It was Hillary Clinton. I mean, a Hillary Clinton presidency would be a disaster for this country, not just for Republicans, for Americans. And that's why I pointed out the contrast, whether it was on the economy, where I think she believes that growing the economy is growing Washington. I believe it's helping get government out of the way to put more people to work in the private sector all across this great country. Whether it's dealing with foreign policy, where the Obama-Clinton doctrine has been an absolute failure. I mean, think about it. Everywhere in the world that Hillary Clinton has touched is worse off today than before she and the president took office. On example after example, there is such a sharp contrast. And instead of picking fights with fellow Republicans, I'm just going to spend my time talking about what we're for and why it's such a sharp contrast with Hillary Clinton.
When Donald Trump said that he really couldn't assure that, you know, he would stick with the party if he were not the nominee, could you support a candidate like that if he were your nominee?
Well, in the end, I want someone who's focused on beating Hillary Clinton. That's certainly where I'm at. I think in the end, I'll make a good case to Donald Trump or anyone else on the stage, either last night or at the earlier debate, that our foe is not just for Republicans, but as Americans, is the better contrast, is the people you saw on the stage last night to the people that weren't on the stage, people like Hillary Clinton and maybe even Joe Biden.
I know that maybe I wasn't clear, but if you could answer that question, that if it were Donald Trump as the nominee, and he's already said if it's not him, he's not so sure he could support the nominee, maybe by extension you, could you support a guy like that as your party's nominee?
Well, in the end, I've said repeatedly, I will support the Republican that the voters of this country pick through the primary and caucus process.
Even if it's Donald Trump.
And I think I can support anyone who was on that stage and anybody who was on the stage earlier the night, because I think they are a much better pick, not just for the Republican Party, but for our country than someone like Hillary Clinton.
You know, on Planned Parenthood, you did mention, and people forget about this, that you were defunding Wisconsin funding for Planned Parenthood years ago. But that's already earned you the wrath of the left, and particularly Hillary Clinton, who said that you left women nowhere to go. What do you think of that?
That's just a ridiculous claim. We defunded Planned Parenthood. You know what we did? We actually transferred the money to non-controversial sources to provide for women's health. They want the money to do the sorts of things that we've seen on these horrific videotapes. We were way ahead of the curve on that long before the videotapes, but we transferred the money to other places that could provide women's health without the controversy, and we were ahead of the curve on that.
All right, now, John Kasich says he's with the curve when it comes to gay marriage. It's the law of the land. Personally, he said he's maybe old school. He's not quite comfortable with it, but that if his daughters came out gay, quoting from him, Governor, I would love them and I would support them. If one of your sons came out gay, would you feel the same way?
Well, I think John's right about that. It's all about love. I pointed out, though, you know, from a legal standpoint, love, as I mentioned, being the factor on a personal basis, no matter what family member you're talking about. But in the end, I've said that I believe that marriage is between one man and one woman. I've had that belief for an awful long time. I voted for it in the legislature. I voted for it in my state's constitution. I defended it as governor of the state of Wisconsin, and I've said that I think under the Constitution that should be left to the states to decide. But going forward, I think the thing the president should particularly be focused on is protecting the religious freedoms of everyday Americans. And it's something I think that's inherent in the United States Constitution. And as president, my administration will defend those rights each and every day.
And you would defend, as I think what Governor Kasich was saying, that it is the law of the land. The Supreme Court has ruled on this. And you would accept that as president?
Well, what I've said is I think I support a constitutional amendment that would allow that decision to be made by the states. In the meantime, though, I think the most important thing the president should be focused on is making sure that religious freedoms are upheld, something that the founders of this country were inherently talking about. Many of them actually came from other places because of religious persecution. And it's not freedom from religion, it's freedom of religion. And I would defend that every day.
You know, maybe owing to your success in the polls and you become a serious candidate, maybe to the left a serious threat, much as Marco Rubio experienced, they start going through your financial records and your own personal finances and bills. And much like Marco Rubio and much like many Americans, you have a lot of bills. You have a lot of college debt. I think about $500,000 in student loan debt for your two boys. You have some Visa bills. You have some Sears credit card bills. A lot of debt, but they say a negative net worth of $72,000, and the argument always comes up: if he's having trouble handling his own finances, how the heck can he handle the nation's? What do you say to that?
Well, for me, I think it allows me to relate to many everyday Americans. As you mentioned, I've got two kids in college. Tonette and I have been helping them pay their bills, like a lot of working families out there. It's precisely why, as governor, I'm proud to say I froze tuition, first time ever, 4 years in a row for all of our University of Wisconsin campuses. That's why I work that much harder to cut property taxes and income taxes on working families in my state, because I know how hard it is to make ends meet for so many families out there. As president, that's exactly what I do as well. I do those sorts of things. I would fight hard and I would win. I wouldn't just fight. I would fight and win every day for working families in this country. And I think Americans now more than ever deserve a president who can relate and who can focus on fighting and winning for them. And that's what I do.
Do you think there's a possibility now, so many of you up there last night in the earlier debate, that we have a lot of candidates, we might not have a nominee by the time we get back to Cleveland for the convention? What do you think of that?
Well, I think it is going to be a drawn-out process, but I think that's a good thing. As you saw on the stage last night, there's a lot of great candidates. There's some good friends of mine up there. I think we've got a lot to talk about. And as long as the focus is on what we have to offer and not on beating each other up, that's certainly the approach I'm going to take. I think Americans are sick and tired of politicians who say what they're against and who they're against. Americans want to vote for something and for someone. We're going to lay out a very clear path, as we did the day we announced, talking about reform, talking about growth, talking about safety. And I think between now and the time that Republicans gather back here in Cleveland, we're going to have a great nominee. I hope to be that nominee. And I think that puts us in a great position to take on Hillary Clinton, someone who is incredibly out of touch. I mean, she could be a pretty good deceiver-in-chief in light of these emails, but I don't think we can trust her to be the commander-in-chief. And I'd love to be the person to make that contrast.
All right, Scott Walker in that pole position, along with Jeb Bush, as being the Donald Trump alternatives.